Hey everybody, this is the fourth here, and in this video I just wanted to explain how the mixer routing works in FL Studio. So if you've been using FL Studio for a little while, you should know the first few things I'll show you. And you may even know everything in this video, but I'm making this for those who don't really know that yet. So if you want to route one of your generator plugins or samples through a mixer track, there are a few different things you can do. So if you just want to route one sound through a mixer track, you can select that sound and right-click whichever mixer track you want and do link selected channels to this track. Alternatively, in the channel settings window, you'll have this option up at the top called FX, and you can set it to a certain number and it will send that sound through the mixer track with that number. So you can see that it's set to 4 right now, and if I play this sound, it is sent through insert 4. But I'm going to take that back to 1. And now it's back at insert 1. And if you want to link a couple of different sounds to the same mixer track, for example this layered kick sound here, you can select both of the channels by either clicking and dragging, or by clicking one and then right-clicking the other, if you kind of want to select tracks that aren't directly next to each other. And then once you have both the channels or all of the channels selected that you want to link through the same mixer track, you can go back down into the mixer and right-click whatever track you want and go to link selected channels to this track. Or you can see the shortcut here is Ctrl L. So now you'll see that both of these sounds are linked through this mixer track. And if you have, a full drum beat like this set up, or even, a full song set up that nothing is sent through the mixer yet and it's time to mix, you can quickly link a bunch of tracks to the mixer by selecting them all, again by clicking and dragging, or by right-clicking if you want to add some that aren't in a row, and then right-clicking an empty mixer track and make sure that all of the tracks to the right of it are also empty, and right-click the first track, go to link selected channels, and starting from this track. And you can see now the sounds are all linked to their own mixer tracks. Starting from the track that I right-clicked and going to the right. So now everything's routed through a mixer track, and I can, turn them all off, make effects in the mixer, adjust their panning, stereo spread levels, and all that. And now within the mixer, you can also do some additional routing if you want to. And in the FL Studio mixer, any track can be routed through any other track as long as it doesn't cause a feedback loop. And by this I mean that the output isn't sent back through the input at any point in your routing chain. So I could route this track through this track, but if I did do that, I wouldn't be able to route this track back through this track. And the way you can do this is with these arrows down here. And if you, click one of these arrows, it will turn the routing on through that track from the selected track. So you can see if I have this track selected and I click the arrow for insert 8, it will now go through insert 8. And one thing you should pay attention to is whether or not you still want it to go through the master. Because right now you can hear if I mute insert 8 and unmute it, the sound gets louder. And that's because this track is currently routed through both the master and this track. So if that's something you want, great. If that's not something you want, you would want to just click the arrow for the master and turn that routing off. And now it's only routed through the insert 8. And then you can adjust the amount that one track is routed through another track by adjusting the level of this knob here. And I mentioned feedback loops before, so you can see that when this track is routed through insert 8, I can't route it back through itself. That arrow isn't an option for me to click, because that would create a feedback loop, and you really don't want any feedback loops. So that's how you can route one track to another. And by default, you have all 99 mixer tracks available to you, and by default they are all routed through the master, and then they are also routed through each of these sends. But the level that they are routed through those sends is set all the way to 0, so none of the sound comes through. But you can see if I take this hat and turn up the level through one of the sends, it will start to be routed through these sends. So in the FL Studio mixer, any track can be made into a send track just by routing a sound through that track. So I can send this track to this track, which is insert 8. Then I can send insert 8 to insert 9. And I could send insert 8 to, insert 9, 10, and 11. Or I could pretty much do whatever I want to. So any track can become a send track in FL Studio. And you also have these 4 sends here. So I'll talk more about what you can use send tracks for in a later video in this section of the tutorial. But just know that you have these 4 sends that are always here in FL Studio. But you can also turn any other mixer track into a send track just by routing one of the other tracks through it. So I can call this hat send, because you can see the hat is sent through it. And regarding the arrow down here to route tracks through other tracks, you have a few other options that you can get from right-clicking it. And you can see I have route to this track only, sidechain to this track, and sidechain to this track only. So if I select route to this track only, it essentially does the same thing as just routing it by clicking it, but it will also automatically disable the send to the master from the track that I'm routing. So you can see if I want to route the hat send through insert 9, I can right click here, select route to this track only, and you can see it turned off the routing to the master and is now only being sent through this track. And then, I can call this hat send 2 if I wanted to. And so now the hat is going through this track originally, and this track is sent through only this track, and then this track is sent through only this track, which is sent through the master. So what do sidechain and sidechain to this track only do? Well, if you select to sidechain a track to another track, you'll see that it kind of routes that track through the track, but the level is set at 0. And what this does is it creates a sidechain input from this track to that track. And if you were to right click and select sidechain to this track only, it's pretty much the same idea as route to this track only, but instead of simply routing it, you are sidechaining it. And you can see that the routing to the master is gone. And so sidechaining doesn't actually put any of the sound through, as you can hear, but it does have a purpose, and it can be very useful for certain things. Different effects in FL Studio utilize sidechaining differently. The most common use of it is going to be for sidechain compression using the Fruity limiter, and that's something I'll cover in a later video. So, don't worry too much about sidechaining right now. I will cover that more, and how you can use it and what it does more specifically in a later video. And in this video, I'm going to specifically focus on synths and bus tracks. So I've showed you how to set up a synth in the FL Studio mixer. If you want a separate synth from these 4 main synths here, to do some different things. And now I'm going to quickly show you how to set up a bus. So what I'm going to do is, rename and color a track and call it drum bus. And now I want all of my sounds to go through this drum bus. All of the drum sounds. So what I'm going to do is, for each of my different drum tracks, I'm going to go through and right-click the routing below the drum bus and route to this track only. That way it only goes through the drum bus. And so I just want to do that for all of my drum sounds. And now this hat sound, it's routed through both of these tracks as well. So I don't want to route the original track through the drum bus. I want to route the final output, which is this one here, through that drum bus. So, instead of routing the original hat, the hat is routed to this track is routed to this track, and this one is routed to the master. So I want to route this one through the drum bus. And I can just, right click it and route to this track only, like I did for the other ones. The only difference is which track I selected. So now if I mute that drum bus, all the drum sounds should be muted. And if I put any effects on the drum bus, all the sounds will be affected by that as well. So that's pretty much the basics of how, routing works in the mixer in FL Studio. Hopefully that was helpful. If you don't quite feel like you have the hang of it, maybe watch this video again and play around with the routing as you do, or just play around with it without watching the video again, and just get a nice good feel for how exactly the mixer routing works. In the other videos in this part of the tutorial, I will take a better look at when exactly you might use mixer synths and bus tracks.